There's a moment you know too well. Someone says something that cuts through you, an insult disguised as a joke, a criticism delivered with a smile, a comment designed to make you feel small, and you stand there, frozen, while your mind goes blank. The perfect response will come to you later in the shower, at 3 in the morning, when it's far too late to matter. By then, the moment has passed, and you're left carrying the weight of words you never said. This isn't about being quick-witted. It's not about winning arguments or humiliating people who attack you. The Stoics understood something profound. The person who controls their response controls the entire interaction. When someone tries to provoke you, they're handing you a gift, the opportunity to demonstrate who you really are. Most people unwrap that gift with trembling hands and react from fear, from ego, from the desperate need to defend themselves. But you can learn to respond differently. What I'm about to share with you are 10 intelligent responses that silence anyone. Not through aggression, not through clever comebacks that escalate conflict, through something far more powerful, the kind of calm, centered presence that makes the other person suddenly aware of their own loss of control. These responses work because they come from strength, not weakness, from choice, not reaction, from the unshakable foundation of someone who knows exactly who they are. Before we begin, write in the comments, "I choose my responses, they don't choose me." This is your anchor, because everything changes when you realize that between stimulus and response there's a space, and in that space lies your freedom. Let's begin. The first response, the pause that speaks volumes. Most people don't realize that silence is a response. Not just any response, but often the most powerful one available. When someone attacks you verbally, they're expecting a reaction. They've prepared for your defense, your counterattack, your emotional collapse. What they haven't prepared for is nothing at all. The pause works like this. Someone says something provocative, and instead of immediately responding, you simply wait. You maintain eye contact. You keep your expression neutral, perhaps slightly curious, and you let the silence stretch until it becomes uncomfortable, not for you, but for them. What happens in that silence is remarkable. The attacker who expected to watch you struggle suddenly finds themselves on display. Their words hang in the air with no response to justify them. They begin to hear how their own statement sounds without the cover of your reaction. Many times they'll start to backpedal, to explain, to fill the uncomfortable void they've created. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is not to become like your enemy. The pause embodies this perfectly. While the other person has lost themselves in aggression, you remain centered. While they've surrendered control to their emotions, you've kept yours. The contrast is visible to everyone present, and it speaks louder than any words you could say. But here's what makes the pause truly powerful. It gives you time to assess whether this deserves any response at all. Time to choose your words carefully if you decide to speak. Time to let your initial emotional reaction pass, so you can respond from wisdom rather than impulse. The pause isn't just silence, it's strategic space. Practice the pause in low-stakes situations first. When someone makes a minor criticism, wait 3 full seconds before responding. You'll notice how different the conversation feels. You'll notice how much more power you have when you're not rushing to fill every silence. And you'll notice how often the other person reveals more about themselves when you simply wait. The pause says something profound without saying anything at all. I am not controlled by your words. I choose when and how I respond. And right now, I'm choosing to let you sit with what you've said. There's a deeper dimension to the pause that's worth exploring. When you pause, you're not just creating discomfort for the attacker. You're also giving yourself the gift of choice. In that silence, you can assess the situation clearly. Is this person worth responding to? Is this criticism actually valid? What response would best serve this moment? Most regretted words are spoken in the first 3 seconds after provocation. The pause eliminates this danger. By the time you speak, if you speak at all, you're speaking from wisdom rather than reaction. This alone will transform your relationships and your reputation. The pause also signals something important to any witnesses. While the attacker looks aggressive and out of control, you look calm and considered. Without saying a word, you've demonstrated the contrast between reactive emotion and centered presence. This social proof matters more than most people realize. Others are always watching, always forming impressions, and the impression of someone who can remain calm under attack is powerful. Practice the pause in low-stakes situations first. When someone makes a minor criticism, wait 3 full seconds before responding. You'll notice how different the conversation feels. You'll notice how much more power you have when you're not rushing to fill every silence. And you'll notice how often the other person reveals more about themselves when you simply wait. If this resonates with you, hit the like button. It tells me you're ready to master the art of strategic silence. The second response, the genuine question. There's a type of question that disarms almost any attack. Not a defensive question asked from weakness, not a sarcastic question designed to wound. A genuine question asked from curiosity. The kind that says, I'm actually interested in understanding what's behind your words. When someone criticizes or attacks you, they expect you to accept their framing of the situation. They've positioned themselves as right and you as wrong. They've defined the terms of the conflict. But a genuine question refuses to accept that framing. It steps back and examines the foundation of their attack. The question might sound like this: help me understand what you mean by that. Or, what specifically are you referring to? Or simply, why do you say that? These questions work because they shift the dynamic entirely. Instead of defending yourself against a vague accusation, you're asking the other person to be specific. And often, when forced to be specific, they realize their attack was based on assumption, emotion, or exaggeration. The specific version of their criticism is usually far smaller than the general one they threw at you. Genuine questions also demonstrate something important. You're not afraid of the truth. If there's valid criticism buried in their attack, you want to find it. If there isn't, you want them to realize that. Either way, you're operating from a position of security, not defensiveness. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that we suffer not from events themselves, but from our judgments about them. A genuine question examines the judgment before accepting it. Maybe what they said has merit, and you can learn from it. Maybe it doesn't, and you can dismiss it. But you won't know until you look more closely, and the act of looking, rather than immediately defending, shows remarkable strength. Here's an example. Someone says, "You always mess things up." The defensive response would be to list all the times you didn't mess things up. The aggressive response would be to attack back. But the genuine question is, can you give me a specific example? I want to understand what you're seeing. This response does several things simultaneously. It calls their bluff if they're exaggerating. It shows you're open to feedback if they're not. It forces them to move from emotional generalization to concrete specifics. And it puts you in the position of the reasonable one, willing to have a real conversation rather than a fight. There's another powerful aspect of the genuine question. It often reveals projection. When you ask someone to explain their criticism, they sometimes realize they're describing themselves more than you. The person who calls you selfish might be struggling with their own selfishness. The person who calls you dishonest might be wrestling with their own deceptions. Your question invites this self-reflection, even if it happens subconsciously. The genuine question works especially well against passive-aggressive comments. Someone makes a veiled criticism, expecting you to either ignore it or react defensively. But when you say, "That's interesting, what do you mean by that?" you force them to either own their criticism openly or retreat from it. Either way, you've exposed the game they were playing. Subscribe to this channel if you're finding value here. We're building something for people who want to master themselves before trying to master others. The third response, the unexpected agreement. Nothing disarms an attacker faster than agreement. Not false agreement that makes you a doormat. Not sarcastic agreement that's really a form of mockery. Genuine agreement with whatever grain of truth exists in their criticism. This works because conflict requires opposition. When you agree, you remove the opposition, and the conflict loses its foundation. The other person was prepared to fight. They had their arguments lined up, their defenses ready. But you can't fight someone who's agreeing with you. Let's say someone calls you stubborn. The common response is denial. No, I'm not. This keeps the conflict alive because now you're arguing about whether you're stubborn. But what if you said, you know, you're probably right. I can definitely be stubborn sometimes, especially about things I care deeply about. What happens next? The attacker has nowhere to go. You've agreed with them. You've acknowledged the truth in their observation. You've even added context that makes your stubbornness understandable. The attack has been completely neutralized without a single defensive word. This response requires genuine self-awareness. You have to actually consider whether there's truth in the criticism, and often there is. None of us are perfect. We all have tendencies, blind spots, and areas where we could improve. When someone points one of these out, even rudely, they might be giving us valuable information. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself of his own flaws in his private writings. He didn't do this from self-hatred, but from a commitment to growth. When you can acknowledge your imperfections with equanimity, criticism loses its power to destabilize you. You already know you're not perfect. The other person isn't telling you anything new. The key is in how you agree. You're not collapsing or admitting defeat. You're acknowledging a truth with the same calm you'd acknowledge that it's raining outside. Yes, it's true, and your peace isn't disturbed by it. This is deeply unsettling for someone who wanted to hurt you with their words. They expected to see you wounded, and instead they see you nodding thoughtfully. Here's another example. Someone says accusingly, "You're so quiet. You never share anything." Instead of defending your introversion, you might say, "That's fair. I do tend to listen more than I talk. I'm working on opening up more, but it's something that takes me time." You've agreed, provided context, and shown self-awareness. The conversation has shifted from accusation to understanding. And the other person, whether they realize it or not, has just learned that attacking you doesn't produce the results they expected. The fourth response, the boundary without explanation. Most people over-explain when they set boundaries. They feel the need to justify their limits, to make them acceptable to the other person, to prove they have the right to their own boundaries. This over-explanation actually weakens the boundary because it invites negotiation and debate. The strong boundary needs no explanation. It's a simple statement of what you will and won't accept, delivered calmly and without apology. I'm not willing to discuss this. That doesn't work for me. I'm not going to engage with that. This conversation is over. These statements are powerful precisely because they offer nothing to argue with. There's no reasoning to poke holes in, no justification to challenge, no explanation to question. There's just a line in the sand, and you're on the other side of it. The Stoics understood that we teach people how to treat us. Every time you allow a boundary to be crossed without consequence, you teach the other person that this boundary doesn't really exist. But when you state a boundary simply and maintain it calmly, you teach them where the line is. This works especially well with people who are used to bulldozing others. These people often rely on making you explain yourself because they know they can poke holes in any explanation. They're skilled at making your boundaries seem unreasonable. But when you don't explain, they have nothing to work with. Your boundary just is. And they have to decide whether to respect it or face the consequences of not respecting it. Let's say someone is pressuring you to do something you don't want to do. The weak response involves justifications. I can't because I have this other thing, and also I'm tired. And besides, I don't think it's a good idea because... Every reason you give is a hook they can argue with. The strong response is simple. No, that doesn't work for me. If they push, you repeat, I've already answered. It doesn't work for me. No new information, no debate, just the boundary restated. You'll notice that people respect you more when you set boundaries this way, not less. The person who clearly knows their limits and calmly maintains them commands respect. The person who apologizes for their boundaries, who over-explains and then compromises when pressured, trains others to push past their limits. The boundary without explanation says, I know my worth, I know what I'll accept, and I don't need your permission or approval to maintain my standards. The fifth response, the redirection to values. When someone attacks you on a personal level, one of the most powerful moves is to redirect to values and principles. This shifts the conversation from the personal to the universal, from their opinion of you to larger questions of what's right. This works because most personal attacks are petty. They're about ego, about winning, about making someone feel small. But when you redirect to values, you elevate the conversation beyond pettiness. You're essentially saying, let's talk about what really matters here, instead of trading insults. For example, someone criticizes a decision you made, suggesting it was foolish. Instead of defending the specific decision, you might say, I made that choice because I believe in being honest, even when it's difficult. We might disagree on the outcome, but I'm comfortable with the principle behind it. Now the conversation has shifted. The other person can't attack your decision without attacking the value of honesty, and most people won't do that openly. You've put yourself on the side of principle, and they'd have to argue against principle to continue attacking you. Seneca wrote extensively about living according to values rather than others' opinions. He understood that when you anchor your actions to principles, criticism loses its sting. You're not acting to please others. You're acting according to your understanding of what's right. If others disagree, that's their prerogative, but it doesn't change your relationship with your own values. This redirection also reveals something important about the attacker. Are they willing to engage with principles, or are they only interested in personal attacks? If they continue attacking you personally after you've elevated the conversation to values, they expose themselves as someone not interested in genuine discussion. Everyone watching sees this, and your position grows stronger while theirs weakens. Here's another example. Someone accuses you of being too soft, too forgiving of others. You could defend yourself, but instead you redirect. I believe that treating people with compassion even when they make mistakes is important. It's how I'd want to be treated. I'd rather err on the side of kindness than harshness. What can they say? Attack kindness? Attack the golden rule? They might, but they'll look petty doing it. You've reframed the entire interaction. What was an attack on your character has become a discussion of values. And on that terrain, you're standing on solid ground. The redirection to values works partly because it appeals to shared principles. Most people, even when attacking you, don't want to be seen as opposing basic values like honesty, kindness, or integrity. When you frame your behavior in terms of these values, attacking you means attacking those principles. Few people are willing to do that openly. This response also helps you stay grounded when facing criticism. When you know why you did something, when you can articulate the value behind your action, criticism loses much of its sting. You're not second-guessing yourself. You're not wondering if maybe they're right. You know what you stand for, and you can articulate it clearly. Here's one more example. Someone criticizes you for not being ambitious enough, for being content with less than they think you should want. The values redirection. I've thought a lot about what actually makes me happy. For me, it's time with people I love and work that feels meaningful. Those are my priorities. More money or status wouldn't add to my life. It would subtract from what I actually value. You haven't defended yourself. You've explained your values. And in explaining them, you've shown that your choices come from clarity, not from lack. The criticism has no power over someone who has deliberately chosen their priorities. Comment below with a value that guides your actions, something you'd redirect to if someone attacked your character. Writing it out helps clarify what you stand for. The sixth response, the honest acknowledgement of emotion. This might seem counterintuitive. When someone attacks you, shouldn't you hide your emotions? Shouldn't you pretend it doesn't affect you? Actually, no. Strategic honesty about your emotional experience can be one of the most disarming responses possible. Here's how it works. Instead of hiding that the attack bothered you, you acknowledge it openly. That hurt to hear. Or, I notice I'm feeling defensive right now. Or, that comment stings. Give me a moment. This works for several reasons. First, it's deeply human. When you show vulnerability in this way, many attackers suddenly see you as a person rather than a target. Their conscience activates. They realize they've caused actual hurt to an actual human being, not just scored points in a game. Second, it takes tremendous strength to acknowledge emotion openly. The weak response is to pretend you're not affected while clearly being affected. This is what most people do, and it fools no one. But to openly name your emotional experience while remaining calm and present requires genuine inner security. You're saying, yes, that affected me, and I'm still here, still present, still in control of my response. Third, it removes the satisfaction of having hurt you secretly. Many attackers want to see you wounded, but pretending you're not. Your obvious pain combined with your denial gives them a sense of power. But when you openly acknowledge the impact without collapsing, you deny them this satisfaction. Yes, your words landed, and it doesn't control me. The Stoics didn't teach suppression of emotions. They taught correct understanding and management of emotions. There's a difference between being controlled by anger and acknowledging that you feel anger. The first is weakness, the second is self-awareness. And self-awareness, openly expressed, is a form of strength. Let's say someone makes a cruel comment about something you're sensitive about. The pretending response is to act like it doesn't bother you, which is often unconvincing. The honest acknowledgement is, that's a painful subject for me. I'm not sure why you'd bring it up that way. This response puts the moral weight back on the attacker. You've openly shared that this is painful. If they continue, they do so, knowing they're causing pain deliberately. Most people will retreat at this point because continuing would make them look cruel, not clever. This response works especially well in environments where there are witnesses. Everyone sees your honesty and vulnerability. Everyone also sees if the other person continues attacking after you've acknowledged the pain. Public opinion shifts in your favor without you having to claim victimhood or counterattack. There's something else worth noting about this response. It models emotional intelligence for everyone present. In a culture that often rewards aggression and penalizes vulnerability, openly acknowledging your emotions is a quiet act of rebellion. It says, we can be human here. We can acknowledge that words have impact. We don't have to pretend we're robots. This modeling effect can actually change the culture of whatever environment you're in. When you demonstrate that it's possible to acknowledge emotion while maintaining dignity, others learn that this is an option. Over time, environments become more honest, more human, and paradoxically, more respectful. The honest acknowledgement of emotion also prevents build-up. When you pretend attacks don't affect you, the impact often goes underground, emerging later as resentment, passive aggression, or emotional explosion. But when you acknowledge impact in the moment, cleanly and openly, the emotion is processed and released. There's nothing to build up. The interaction is complete. The seventh response, the reframe that changes everything. Every attack contains an implicit frame, a way of seeing the situation that makes the attack make sense. When someone calls you slow, they're framing speed as the relevant metric. When someone calls you obsessive, they're framing focus as negative. The reframe response challenges this implicit frame by offering a different lens. For example, someone criticizes you for spending too much time on a project. Their frame is that speed matters most. Your reframe, I'd rather do it right than do it fast. I can live with being slow. I can't live with sloppy work. You haven't denied being slow. You've challenged whether slow is the right thing to be criticizing. You've introduced a different value, quality, and suggested that by that metric, your approach makes perfect sense. Reframing is powerful because it exposes the hidden assumptions in any criticism. Every attack assumes certain things are good and certain things are bad. But these assumptions can be challenged. What looks like weakness from one angle might look like strength from another. The Stoic practice of examining impressions is essentially a reframing practice. When something appears bad, you examine it more closely. Is it actually bad? Or is it just that you're looking at it from an angle that makes it seem bad? Often, what seems like an obstacle is actually an opportunity. What seems like a flaw is actually a feature. Here's another example. Someone criticizes you for being too emotional. Their frame is that emotion is weakness. Your reframe. I feel things deeply. That's what allows me to connect with people and understand what they're going through. I wouldn't trade that for detachment. Now, being emotional isn't a flaw to defend. It's a strength to celebrate. You've taken the very thing they tried to attack and transformed it into something positive. The attack has no target because you've moved the target to where the arrow becomes a gift. Reframing requires quick thinking, but it's a skill that can be developed. Practice looking at your own characteristics from multiple angles. What you see as weaknesses might be strengths from a different perspective. When you've done this internal work, you'll be ready to reframe in real time when someone attacks. There's a deeper principle at work here. The Stoics taught that nothing is inherently good or bad. It's our judgment that makes it so. This means any characteristic can be seen multiple ways. Being cautious can be seen as being fearful or being prudent. Being bold can be seen as being reckless or being courageous. The frame determines the perception. When you master reframing, you realize that you have power over how your traits are perceived. You don't have to accept the frame an attacker puts on your behavior. You can offer a different frame, one that's often more accurate and more favorable. Here's one more example. Someone says, "You're too sensitive. Everything bothers you." The common response would be to deny being sensitive or to apologize for it. But the reframe, "I pay attention to things others miss." That sensitivity is what makes me good at what I do. I'd rather feel too much than feel nothing. You've taken sensitivity from a weakness to a strength. The attacker was trying to shame you. Instead, you've claimed pride in the very trait they criticized. This is the power of reframing. The eighth response, the compassionate observation. Sometimes the most powerful response to an attack is to observe, with compassion, what the attack reveals about the attacker. Not to use this observation as a weapon, but to genuinely acknowledge the pain that often drives aggressive behavior. This sounds like, "You seem really upset about this," or "It sounds like this is touching something deep for you," or "I wonder what's really going on. This seems like more than what's on the surface." This works because most attacks aren't really about the target. They're about the attacker's own pain, frustration, or insecurity being projected outward. When you observe this with compassion instead of defensiveness, you short-circuit the attack by addressing its real source. The compassionate observation is disarming because it refuses to take the attack at face value. Instead of debating whether you're actually incompetent or lazy or whatever the accusation is, you're looking beneath the accusation to the emotional state driving it. This is often much more accurate. People who are content and secure don't generally go around attacking others. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. In his meditations, he reminds himself that when people behave badly, they're acting from their own ignorance or pain. Getting angry at them is like getting angry at a sick person for coughing. Understanding this doesn't mean accepting bad behavior, but it does mean responding to the human being rather than just the behavior. Here's an example. Someone lashes out at you disproportionately to the situation. The defensive response is to argue about the situation. The compassionate observation is, "Wow, you're really frustrated. Is everything okay?" This seems like it's about more than just this moment. Often this opens a door. The person realizes they've overreacted and acknowledges what's really bothering them. The conflict dissolves because you've addressed the actual problem, not the surface symptoms. Even if they don't open up, you've still demonstrated that you see them as a person, not just an opponent. This response requires genuine compassion, not pretending. If you use it manipulatively, people will sense that, and it will backfire. But if you can genuinely see the suffering behind the attack and respond to that suffering with kindness, you transform the entire interaction. The compassionate observation also changes how you experience the attack. When you see it as an expression of the other person's pain, rather than an accurate assessment of you, it stops feeling personal. You might even feel sorry for someone who is so disturbed that they need to lash out at others. This shift in perception is profoundly protective for your own peace of mind. The ninth response, the confident agreement with consequences. This is a variation of agreement, but with an important addition. You agree, and then you state the natural consequence with complete calm. Someone threatens, "If you don't do what I want, I'll leave." The confident agreement with consequences. "I understand. I'll be sorry to see you go, but I respect your decision." Whoa, what just happened? The threat was meant to manipulate you through fear of loss, but instead of panicking and complying, you accepted the threatened consequence. You agreed to it, and you did so with such calm confidence that it's clear you're not being controlled. This works because most threats are bluffs. People threaten consequences they have no intention of following through on, hoping the fear alone will control you. When you calmly accept the consequence, you call the bluff. Now they have to either follow through, which they often don't want to do, or back down, which weakens their position significantly. Even when the threat is real, accepting the consequence with calm removes its power to control you. Yes, the consequence might be painful, but you're not going to be manipulated by fear of it. This is genuine freedom, the freedom of someone who has counted the cost and decided that integrity matters more. Seneca wrote about practicing poverty, about imagining losing everything so that the fear of loss would no longer control him. This same principle applies here. When you've accepted that some consequences might happen, and you've decided you can live with them, threats lose their power. Here's another example. Someone says, "If you keep speaking up about this, people will think you're difficult." The confident agreement, "Maybe they will. I've decided that saying what I believe is more important than managing everyone's perception of me. I'm at peace with that trade-off." You've agreed that the consequence might happen. You've shown you've considered it. And you've demonstrated that you're choosing your path anyway. The threat was supposed to make you doubt yourself. Instead, it just gave you an opportunity to articulate your values. This response requires actually being at peace with the consequences. You can't fake it. So the real work is internal, deciding what matters to you, counting the costs, and reaching genuine acceptance. Once you've done that inner work, the response flows naturally. There's something liberating about accepting potential consequences in advance. When you've already made peace with what might happen, you're free. You're not acting from fear of loss. You're acting from your values, knowing that whatever happens, you can handle it. This is what the Stoics called the premeditation of evils. By imagining and accepting the worst that could happen, they freed themselves from the fear of it. The person who has already accepted that they might lose their job can't be controlled by the threat of losing their job. The person who has already accepted that a relationship might end can't be manipulated by threats of abandonment. The confident agreement with consequences is this principle in action. You're not hoping the consequence won't happen. You're not pretending you don't care. You're genuinely accepting that it might happen and communicating that acceptance clearly. This is genuine strength, the kind that can't be faked. The 10th response, the graceful exit. Sometimes the most intelligent response is to leave, not storm out in anger, not slink away in defeat, but calmly, gracefully, and deliberately end the interaction on your own terms. This sounds like, I don't think this conversation is productive. I'm going to step away now. Or, we're not going to agree on this. Let's leave it here. Or simply, I'm done discussing this. The graceful exit is powerful because it demonstrates ultimate control. You're not at the mercy of the interaction. You can leave whenever you choose. Many people feel trapped in conversations, obligated to continue until some resolution is reached. But you're not trapped. You're choosing to participate, and you can choose to stop. This works especially well with people who want to wear you down. Some people win by exhaustion. They argue endlessly, never conceding, waiting for you to give up. The graceful exit refuses to play this game. You're not giving up because you've lost. You're leaving because continuing serves no purpose. The Stoics valued practical wisdom, knowing what's worth your energy and what isn't. Not every conversation is worth having. Not every argument is worth winning. Sometimes the wisest thing is to recognize that nothing productive will come from continuing, and to exit with your dignity intact. The key is the graceful part. You're not leaving in a huff. You're not slamming doors or making dramatic statements. You're simply calmly declaring the conversation over and departing. This shows more control than any continued engagement would. Here's an example. Someone keeps pushing an argument in circles, repeating the same points louder each time. You've made your case, they've made theirs, and it's going nowhere. The graceful exit. I've said what I have to say on this. I don't think more talking will help. Let's leave it here. Then you actually leave. You don't let them pull you back in with one more thing. You don't continue engaging. You said the conversation was over, and you meant it. This response teaches people something important. They can't keep you in a conversation against your will. Your participation is voluntary and can be withdrawn. This knowledge changes how they approach future interactions with you. They know that if they push too hard, you'll simply leave. And for many people, that's enough to keep them more civil. The graceful exit also preserves relationships that might be damaged by continued conflict. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a relationship is to stop a conversation before it goes too far. Words said in the heat of argument can't be unsaid. The graceful exit prevents those words from ever being spoken. There's wisdom in knowing when to walk away. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every point is worth making. Sometimes the wisest response is no response at all, just a calm departure from a situation that offers nothing but conflict. This isn't weakness. It's the strategic allocation of your limited energy toward what actually matters. Epictetus taught that some things are up to us and some things are not. Whether someone wants to argue is not up to us. But whether we participate in that argument absolutely is. The graceful exit is the ultimate exercise of this control. You can't make them stop wanting to fight, but you can remove yourself from the fight entirely. Let me bring all of this together. These 10 responses share something in common. They all come from a place of strength, not weakness. They're not about defending yourself desperately. They're about choosing how you engage with the world from a foundation of inner security. The pause that speaks volumes, using silence strategically to maintain control and expose the attacker. The genuine question, shifting from defense to curiosity, examining the foundation of any attack. The unexpected agreement, removing the fuel for conflict by acknowledging truth with equanimity. The boundary without explanation, setting clear limits without over-justifying or inviting debate. The redirection to values, elevating personal attacks to discussions of principle. The honest acknowledgement of emotion, showing vulnerable strength by naming your experience openly. The reframe that changes everything, challenging the hidden assumptions in any criticism. The compassionate observation, addressing the pain behind the attack rather than the attack itself. The confident agreement with consequences, accepting threatened outcomes to remove their power. The graceful exit, ending interactions on your terms when continuing serves no purpose. Notice what all these responses have in common. None of them require you to be clever or quick-witted. None of them require you to come up with the perfect words in the perfect moment. What they require is inner work. The work of knowing yourself, accepting yourself, clarifying your values, and developing genuine equanimity in the face of external pressure. This is why these responses are truly intelligent. They're not verbal tricks. They're expressions of a certain quality of character, and that character can be developed through practice, through the daily work of self-examination and self-improvement that the Stoics recommended. Here's an important truth. The person you need to become to deliver these responses is more valuable than the responses themselves. These aren't techniques to memorize. They're reflections of a way of being in the world. When you develop genuine equanimity, genuine self-knowledge, genuine security in who you are, these responses emerge naturally. You don't have to think about them. They're just how you respond because they're who you are. The inner work is the real work. It involves facing your own insecurities honestly. It involves knowing what you value and why. It involves accepting your imperfections without being defined by them. It involves developing such a stable sense of self that external opinions, whether positive or negative, don't fundamentally disturb you. This is the project of a lifetime, not a quick fix. But every step you take toward this kind of inner development makes you more capable of responding wisely in any situation. And the responses themselves become practice opportunities for further development. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen your capacity for equanimity. Each time you ask a genuine question instead of defending, you strengthen your curiosity and openness. Each time you exit gracefully instead of fighting pointlessly, you strengthen your practical wisdom. Each of these responses requires practice. They don't come naturally to most people because most people are conditioned to react rather than respond. The reaction comes from fear, from ego, from the desperate need to defend and prove. The response comes from choice, from centeredness, from the understanding that you are not your reputation, not others' opinions, not even your emotions. You are the one who chooses how to engage. The Stoics practiced these principles daily for their entire lives. They understood that mastery isn't achieved in a single insight, but through consistent practice. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to strengthen your capacity for wise response. Every provocation becomes a training exercise. Start with one response. Practice it until it feels natural. Then add another. Over time, you'll find yourself naturally choosing the appropriate response for each situation, without having to think about it consciously. This is the goal, not to have a list of clever comebacks, but to become the kind of person who naturally responds with wisdom, calm, and strength. When you've reached this point, you'll notice something remarkable. People stop attacking you as often. Not because you've intimidated them into silence, but because attacking you doesn't work. It doesn't produce the reaction they want. It doesn't give them power over you. It doesn't diminish you. If anything, it elevates you in others' eyes while exposing them. Word gets around that you're not an easy target, and most people don't bother attacking what they can't easily wound. This is the ultimate victory, not winning arguments, but making arguments unnecessary. Not silencing critics, but transforming the dynamic so that criticism loses its power. Not proving your worth to others, but being so grounded in your own worth that you don't need external validation. The world is full of people who want to provoke you, disturb your peace, and make you react from your worst self. Every day brings new opportunities for conflict, for offense, for the loss of your center. But every day also brings new opportunities to practice these responses, to strengthen your capacity for wise engagement, to prove to yourself that you can remain calm and centered no matter what comes. Thank you for staying with me through this exploration. If these responses have given you something valuable, leave a like. Subscribe if you want more content on developing inner strength and wisdom. And comment below with the word mastery to show me you're committed to practicing these responses until they become second nature. Remember, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies your freedom. Use it wisely. See you in the next video.